Breaking the law is something we find ourselves doing in so many games, whether it's driving dangerously, planning heists, or committing violent acts. We all commit crimes that would horrify us in real life. So why are we doing this? What is it about these actions that feel so fun, even addictive in a virtual world? Could an explanation be that we are secretly drawn to violence and chaos? Or does the freedom of a consequence-free setting offer us something deeper? Honestly, this video came to me when I realized how many illegal things I was doing in the games I was playing. It soon dawned on me that, ever since I was a child, these games involved some form of crime being committed. The worrying part was that I clearly enjoyed it and didn't even care for my actions. Was I an evil criminal? Probably not, as these are just video games, right? Obviously nothing illegal is actually happening, but games simulate real crimes and therefore must have some influence over us. This video will explore why we enjoy breaking the law so much in video games.
The fact is that a new generation of video games crosses that line, containing the most horrible depictions of graphic violence.
Crime and legal offences have been a popular fantasy depicted throughout human history. These fantasies add a deeper level to the stories we see and hear through film and literature. Video games elevate this though to another level. They allow us to act those very crimes and offences. The first video game to involve the player committing crimes was the 1976 title Death Race. The game developed by Exidy involved the player being tasked with driving a car into stick-like figures and killing them to score points. Players were encouraged to keep hitting these stick-like figures to secure a new high score. The impact of Death Race's violence came with public outrage. The pixelated 2D game was in all the main headlines, attacked for its glorification of violence on all sides and described as a morbid and sick game. Televised reports spread out about a game that let players kill fictional people, and opposition believed such violence was teaching players the blueprint on how to run people over and should never be considered a game. This story really fascinated me. Nearly 50 years later, when I look back at Death Race, I couldn't really fathom how a game so simple could ever be considered violent. I mean, it's a car that for a frame or so goes over a person who then turns into what, a cross? Even if we put ourselves in 1976, there is clearly other media that is much more violent. So what would be the problem with enjoying a game like this? But as I kept playing the game, I started seeing it. The constant goal of running people over and over, and their screams echoing one by one. And those points rising and rising and rising. For some reason, I could imagine how sinister this must have felt in 1976. In an era where the most popular titles on the market included playing a game of tennis in Pong. Death Race was unlike any other arcade game people had seen. What makes Death Race so problematic is that it was the first media that allowed players to act on their dark fantasy. Players were given the ability to enjoy breaking the law through their actions by harming these human-like figures with no consequences. It was this aspect that led to such a public backlash, because unlike film or books, games require the player to act out their crimes. Critics like the National Security Council argue that gaming allowed players to take an active part in violent entertainment that film and literature didn't. Death Race wasn't just a game, it was simulating an active crime in which the players were taking action towards violence. You'd think that such critique would derail the game and hurt sales, but quite the opposite happened. Critique wasn't enough to stop the game's success. The game was considered as very enjoyable, achieving the 8th highest grossing arcade game in the US in 1976. Despite its controversy, people continued to flock to it, and game developers realized that crime and illegality was good for business. Game developers began to really let the player explore their criminal fantasies, with the 90s being the catalyst for some of the most shocking games ever released, as now being able to commit illegal crimes was a game design principle, with some game studios adopting it as their main philosophy. Mortal Kombat debuted in arcades in 1992, and it's safe to say the game took Death Race's violence to a whole new level. What made MK so unique though was its gore and violence, a display that simulated the brutality of fights to the death. But this part wasn't Mortal Kombat's most controversial feature. It was their brutal fatalities. A fatality, if you've never seen one before, is a finishing move you are able to do on your opponent once you've beaten them. They took violence and gore to the absolute extremes. Head decapitations, severing spines, even ripping hearts out. It was, even for today's standards, just crazy. And Mortal Kombat's violence went even further, as the game's character sprites were modelled off real people as opposed to the hand-drawn animated fighting games at the time. So with players executing their opponents that were modelled off real people, can you guess how the world reacted? With a huge public outcry. So much so that between 1992 and 1993, hearings were conducted on video game violence. This led to the conception of the ESRB rating system, requiring all video games to be rated and for that rating to be displayed on the game's packaging, so you now know who to blame next time you get declined for that 18+ game. What fascinates me about Mortal Kombat's fatalities though isn't the violent nature of the fatality itself, and it's not why I have mentioned it to you. What fascinates me is the player's choice. Although a brutal fighting game, Mortal Kombat only reaches its truly sinister display at that fatality point. Here something special happens. The player chooses what happens next. Players don't have to fatality their opponent, for they have already won, and a simple punch would end the game. Even if they just waited, the game would end. But the players still decide to act out the inputs and generate a fatality in-game. This really made me question why I ever chose to do fatalities on my opponents. Could it be that I enjoy violence or even have a fantasy for it? Yes, the violence in games does have some wow factor to it, and it can be intriguing and cool, but outside of the game I would never seek this form of brutalism. In fact, I would always avoid it. So why do we seem to enjoy violence in games, and why are we drawn to it as it gets more and more extreme? Is there something within us? Well, researchers seem to claim that virtual violence may be enjoyable because it offers pleasurable gratifications. For example, players could perceive their effective harm doing as a proof for their own superiority, stimulating excitement and euphoria in their game experiences. This would explain why players perform fatalities, as it does provide a winning superiority statement that I have won and you are now dead in game, a type of showboating that basically gives a final one-up over our opponents. Think about it. How many of us easily get angry in games? After finally beating someone, performing that fatality or any other form of violence provides that gratification of dopamine that we are more superior than our opponents. This explanation does make sense to me because, like I said, I can remember acting in this very way in countless games I've played. Apart from that one time in Mortal Kombat 11 where I turned into the greatest jazz player of all time. You don't know how many death threats I got from this. Still, this explanation does come with a few flaws. It seems to heavily favour multiplayer games and ignore single-player games. Single-player games where our opponents are just NPCs and not real people don't seem to see the same use of violence from the player. We're not being violent to feel superior over these digital beings and NPCs. In these cases, we are just playing the game and doing what the game requires. Okay, so why are we enjoying the violence in these scenarios then? The simple explanation would be boredom. Video games for many provide an escape from the player's existing reality. A reality that comes with stresses, boredom, and problems. This escape allows the player to alleviate their issues and act on their curiosity and impulses with no judgment. It is this ability to do anything that eliminates the player's boredom. If players were forced to follow rules and laws in certain games, it would make the experience boring, replicating the player's reality. I'm sure we've all tried to drive lawfully at one point in our GTA walkthroughs. We stop at traffic lights, we ensure no cars are hit, and we obviously avoid killing innocent NPCs. After about 2 minutes, this becomes boring and we're back to driving like a maniac and destroying anything in our path. I know you've definitely had that shared experience. We, the players, clearly don't enjoy following rules and laws. The games we play are designed to avoid this very problem, because why the hell would anyone want to sit down after school or work and decide to be an upstanding citizen following the same existence they are trying to mentally leave? Except those absolute freaks who play those simulator games. I swear these types of games have to be some sort of money laundering scheme. Anyways, so it does make sense why we are drawn to commit crimes in games, but we are just bored with reality. And the more extreme the crime, the more choices, the more possibilities, the more drawn we are to committing crimes. Because being bored is a universal human experience that we are constantly trying to escape, and breaking the law in video games provides a solution to this very problem. because committing crimes is better than being bored. I don't mean that literally, by the way. Still, this doesn't quite explain everything. I mean, being bored could be part of it, yeah, but being violent isn't the only way to stop being bored. You can cure boredom by doing other random things. Not all games are designed to encourage law-breaking and violence, and they too also alleviate boredom. In fact, quite a few games maintain that law, rules, and morals are very important to its game design. A basic system games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and a lot of RPGs follow is using legal morality systems. These systems are used to describe the player's morality, whether he is a good or bad player. The game tracks your actions and behaviour. Each decision has its consequences which affects the game. Your morality can unlock alternative stories, have NPCs treat you differently, and most importantly, your mental consciousness is affected. Suddenly, with something holding me accountable, it prevented me from going completely crazy in the game. Every decision started to matter, making me question my every move and actually caring about the consequences of what I was doing. Did I actually want to shoot this guy? Should I try and actually buy this item? Or should I help this NPC? All of a sudden, I was mirroring who I was in real life. I believe the explanation for this occurring is because we the players tend to follow a more moral pursuit in games as it's more enjoyable and relates better to our own beliefs. Although we break the law and rules, we rarely tend to fully turn pure evil, especially on our first playthrough of games. We tend to balance out the morality and continue to hold our morals even in settings of carnage and destruction. Clearly, this can be a very fun gameplay feature that in some instances even elevates the experience of certain games. It adds this layer of depth and complexity that prevents a game from just being an immoral sandbox, which ironically can be boring. Furthermore, research seems to support this idea. Bandura went on to explain that violence in games that conflicted with one's inner moral standards triggered distressful concern. When something violates that user's internal moral standard, feelings like guilt and disgust are likely to emerge. When something is constantly breaking that moral disengagement barrier, we return to our former self. This is why it can sometimes be extremely difficult to commit crimes in games, especially when a moral system is constantly judging our every move. All of a sudden, their morals push through, and what they are doing becomes a conscious thought conflicting with reality. What's cool is that certain games go further and demand that we follow the law, rules, and good morals at all times. Sports games are a great example of games that benefit from following rules. You can't play any sport without playing within its rules. When the laws of the game are broken, it makes the experience sufferable. We the player absolutely follow this as well and have a lot of fun doing so. Other roleplay games also demand legal justice. Whether it's playing as a lawyer in Ace Attorney or even a superhero, the law is followed because the medium demands it. And as a result, the gameplay isn't boring? Wait, how is it not boring? We saw how following the law in GTA created a boring mess. So why doesn't the same apply for these games? I think we enjoy a game if it provides the experience we expect. We don't expect to be the bad guy in a superhero game, and we don't expect to follow the law in GTA. Each game has its expectations already set through their characters, genre, and settings. And some of us like to enjoy experiencing these lawful and moral settings. So it's not that crime itself is very enjoyable, but when we want to roleplay in a criminal setting, those of us that want to experience this also enjoy it. Crime, although popular in games, isn't a determining factor of our enjoyment in games, with some players even seeking something else from their experiences. I also wanted to mention settings. I believe the setting and context we see the crime in drastically affects our enjoyment of it. In some contexts, crimes can be extremely funny. Whether it's the stereotypical dumb robber in a film or the innocent NPC standing on the side of the road, we see crime differently when we know it's not happening in a serious setting or context. Games heavily rely on being a comedic relief for players. Even when we play some of the most serious games, we still find ourselves laughing. I think we enjoy the crimes in games not because they are funny, but because we have detached the action from being a crime in this virtual setting. Crime is presented as a hyper-real performance, disconnected from real consequences. It's not crime, but crime porn. A distorted mirror of society where crime becomes sort of like a parody, a cartoon. Take the action of shooting someone. An action like this obviously causes some form of trauma and mental scarring that no person should ever experience. Yet, in the games we play, it's just another funny gimmick. I find myself just thinking about it now. When I mentally see both in my heads, I only feel distraught for the reality and not for the game experience. In our heads, we don't see these actions as crimes. Similarly, it's impossible for the player to see their actions in games as bad because they are not. Playing video games is just that, and the player cannot escape that virtual reality. And when the game tries to govern the player's morality and actions, they always break through and do what they want, because at the end of the day, there are no severe consequences because it's all legal. Who are we when nobody's watching? This is a deep question that I cannot answer for each viewer. It's something I don't even know if I can answer for myself. It requires us to enter the world of psychological evaluation, a world of theories and speculation, something the law doesn't inherently follow. The theory I believe, though, that explains this issue is a theory proposed by Carl Jung. Jung theorizes that every person has an unconscious aspect of their personality that is deemed unacceptable or undesired by the individual and society. These include negative behaviors, impulses, and emotions. It is considered the dark side of our personalities that is hidden within our consciousness, yet influencing our thoughts, feelings, and actions. The shadow is not inherently evil or negative, it's just a representation of our unfulfilled desires, fantasies, and needs, suppressed away out of fear of legal and moral consequence. Video games give us a glimpse of who we truly are when nobody's watching. A person that isn't entirely morally and legally just, but a person acting on their own beliefs, curiosity, and desires. Not that society requires. And because video games allow this, it allows for a therapeutic relationship to develop, a form of therapy called shadow work. The player, while playing games, becomes more aware of their shadow, whilst integrating the shadow into conscious awareness. Like I mentioned, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, and there are benefits to it which include greater self-understanding, improved relationships, and more of an authentic sense to self. Does it reflect who we are? Maybe, but maybe our enjoyment of breaking the law in video games just represents our nature as humans, the nature to be curious and seek answers. For the final part of this video, I wanted to explore why any of this even matters. I mean, if we have established that we are not committing crimes, then why does it matter what we do in games? The problem is that the true effects of this very issue is still being played out. I am part of a generation that saw the rise of video games. A lot of these games I was exposed to improved in realism, and therefore so did its crimes it asked me to commit. So who knows what effects this had on me? This level of simulation and action shouldn't be overlooked though. A medium that follows a similar suit is film's use of method actors. I want to look at the actors who have played the infamous DC villain, the Joker. Heath Ledger's 2008 Joker from The Dark Knight is often considered as the greatest villain performance of all time. A triumph feat shadowed by the tragedy that such a performance required. The dark and twisted character led to Heath Ledger the actor immersing himself in the character to simulate chaos, violence, and nihilism. It was reported that Heath struggled with insomnia and emotional detachment after filming. Sadly, Heath died shortly after filming. Many contribute this role to his psychological decline. Joker's not an easy character to portray. One of the most complex villains requires a level of psychological immersion that is not natural to the human. Joaquin Phoenix took on the role in 2019, providing an Oscar-winning performance for his version of the Joker. He also described the experience negatively, claiming it to be psychologically dangerous, as it revealed parts of himself he didn't want to explore. I wanted to mention this link because immersion provides a detachment from reality that some of us struggle to return from, often being unaware that the detachment has occurred. Playing video games provides a level of immersion and detachment that can also be very difficult to escape, especially if the player is also trying to escape reality to be present in that game. It's a dangerous relationship, and we have already seen a lot of tragic events being linked to the games we play. And as games become more and more realistic, that line between reality and the virtual world will soon fade, and there could be a time and place where games potentially become a catalyst to illegal crimes. This can happen, especially considering the desensitization video games cause. How often should a person be exposed to crimes? The answer should be never, but for games you may have witnessed them thousands to millions of times. Seeing people get shot in games over and over again will desensitize us. If people view this as normal behavior, you may never know if it inspires them to replicate it. I do remain optimistic though. Countless studies have been conducted on video games and their influences on us. So far, nothing of significance has been found linking video games to real-life crimes, violence, and aggression. Other factors are at play that are more determining on why crime occurs. Furthermore, we all know the benefits games do bring that actually counters crimes. Benefits such as helping with stress, loneliness, friendships, problem solving, and many, many more. So why do we enjoy breaking the law in video games? Maybe it's boredom, maybe it's about power, control, or just having the freedom to do what we can't in real life. Maybe it's that weird little thrill of doing something you know is wrong without facing any real consequences. Or maybe it's deeper. Maybe it's that hidden part of us finally getting a playground. Games don't just show us crime, they let us act it through our choices. And that says something, because even in a world of no rules, most of us still hesitate, still make decisions that reflect something about who we truly are. Does enjoying crime in a game make you evil? Because if games are a space where we reveal who we are when no one's watching, maybe we should be paying attention to what we do. This concludes the video. If you enjoyed, like and share, it would help me out a lot. If you would like to watch other video essays on legal issues surrounding gaming, why not check out this video on whether shareholders have killed video games. Thanks for watching.